And? To screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up.
And welcome to the This Week in Worcester podcast. My name is Tom Marino. I am editor of This Week in Worcester. I am here with Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is the executive producer of Managed Media. He is the president of Hollywood Film Group. He is a contributor to This Week in Worcester. And he's my friend John. And we do this every Sunday we're a few minutes late, but about 8:35 every Sunday night, talking about either things that happened in the past week or things that we expect to see in the coming week in our beautiful and wonderful and well-governed and totally makes sense city of Worcester.
And totally makes sense. Best city of all time.
Of all time.
Best city ever. Best city ever. Worcester, baby. We even do corruption better than anybody else. That's how we get down. We don't mess around. You know what I mean? We don't mess around.
We don't mess around, Then maybe
you have Inspector Deck's verse memorized from Triumph?
No.
Wu-Tang's for the kids. All right, continue.
I mean, I know, like, only go for Cuban links, like, in pieces. You know? Like, the stuff that sticks in your head, you're like, oh, I know that part, you sing along, and then you don't know what they're talking about again, you know?
So the thing is, hey, being a modern white dude, right? You know what I mean? Like, in 2025, right? So Inspector Deck makes it easy for me to continue to rap along with him. And so I can say all those things. It's like, yeah, Deck is the man, bro. Anyways, continue. Sorry. All right, sorry. Everybody in the chat, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying.
I don't know if he has more than one solo record, but this first solo record was decent.
His first solo record was yeah.
This is the tail end of the show conversation. Let's get to the front end of the show conversation. There may be movement in the Natale Cosenza situation.
This is amazing. Maybe I don't want to take credit for it, but I kind of want to take. I want us to take credit for it.
Okay, who gets credit for it?
Be on Nat's good side. You know what I'm saying? I want to be on Nat's good side. That's it. You know what I mean? Although I'm sure we probably are. He's pro This Week in Worcester. Nat, our man Nat.
I talked to him the other day when I saw this on the agenda, and he told me absolutely nothing.
He's a smart man.
He's just we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to talk about this. So which means there's stuff going on that he obviously can't talk about until it's done. But the reason why this became to light is because the city council agenda on Tuesday has a recommendation to go into an executive session to discuss legal strategy with a Natale Cosenza case. Now that might seem like it's early in the process, but it's not. I don't know. I'm not in these executive sessions, but my assumption is, this is the city manager informing the council on what he's decided or where they are or whatever. So this is probably a mostly one-way conversation. The administration explaining to the council where we're at. If you don't know of the Natale Cosenza case, Nat got out of prison about 9 years ago now. He was in prison for 16 years. He was convicted of breaking into a home invasion and alleged potential attempted rape. There was DNA evidence that didn't match him and was unaccounted for. along with a whole bunch of other problems with the case. But nonetheless, prosecutors got a conviction out of a jury. After a couple appeals failed, just before he had completed his 16-year sentence, he was very close to completing his full sentence. He was released based on a years-long study that the Massachusetts Supreme Court did into the reliability of witness testimony and how we maybe see things that aren't real when we're in situations of high stress. That was a very crude summary of it, but you get it. And so this study looked back at this study on witness reliability combined with looking back at his case, and the judge in his original case didn't allow a witness who was an expert who actually worked with the Supreme Court in doing this study many years later. But the Nats lawyers tried to call a defense witness who's an expert on witness testimony, and the judge did not allow that. And so that was eventually, although he had completed most of his sentence, what allowed him, what enabled him to be released. So he does not have a conviction. The case was thrown out for retrial, given that he, I don't know what went into the district attorney's decision not to retry the case, but he decided not to retry the case.
Very rare. Right.
But I mean, I'm sure part of it is he's already served the vast majority of his sentence. So what are we trying to convict for? I'm sure that's part of it. Part of it could be that there was, it's a difficult case because there was problems with it. So nonetheless, that was released about 9 years ago. About 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago now, in 2022, his civil case concluded, and that's where the interesting stuff comes in. So a civil jury found that two detectives of the Worcester Police Department, one manipulated evidence and another conspired with that person to manipulate that evidence. And that was awarded $8 million. However, the city was removed from that case. So this was the only people involved in the case now with the two cops. As you can imagine, they don't have $8 million. The city was removed from the case for reasons that are technical and doesn't really matter. They weren't a party to the case by its end. They were named in the case, but removed during the process. And so now we've had 2+ years of, I don't know what to call it. I don't know how much contact there has been, but from the outside, it looks like stalemate. These two guys don't have the money. And the city, I'm not sure what their position is. Again, when you're involved in these things, it doesn't make any sense to say much about what's going on. And of course, the city's not going to say what's going on. So there's a lot of kind of interpreting the tea leaves here. Now, both of those officers, one of them was also a defendant in the Don Tron case, which I think got settled in 2008, if I remember correctly, and settled for $2.1 million. In that case, a 16-year-old girl was interrogated for an extended period of time in what a judge later ruled was a coercive interrogation, and thus her what do you want to call it? Her what's the word? When you admit to doing something, John?
When you admit to doing something, you
confess.
Confess.
Confess. Yes. So the judge ruled that her confession was coerced. You can look up Anatomy of a Bad Confession. Brian Boweri, who used to be a journalist, he's now retired, did amazing work on the story. You can see the videos and all of that. It's frankly disgusting. It's a 16-year-old girl, mind you, without a lawyer, without a parent. And she eventually admitted to killing her own child, which she did not do. In fact, I believe evidence later showed the child was not murdered at all. She spent almost 3 years incarcerated awaiting trial for a trial that never happened because her confession was thrown out, and that's all they really had. Fast forward And although Nat's case happened before that, we learned about all of this, of course, until just a few years ago. And so that officer has now retired and is stealing pension from good cops. And the other officer is still on the job. So the city wouldn't, has said, this is not fault. We didn't train them to do this. Basically, we're not liable for this. And in the case, the liability protection that police officers had, because this was a violation of core civil rights, does not apply. It was stripped of them. So they're personally liable for this decision. The city has basically hung them out to dry on this decision. And then, we have Nat, who again served 16 years in prison and has received his settlement from the state, which is capped at $750K. So we got that pretty quickly, and that's what he's got so far for compensation for being incarcerated for 16 years without a confession. So imagine, like, if he gets pulled over by a state police officer or whatever, and they look at his record, it looks like this man's been kidnapped by aliens for 16 years because there's nothing to show that he was in prison because he has no conviction, right? It's truly insane. And so here we are now.
So the thing is, there's been some issues with the state database and removing things like that. So it's very possible that, that sometimes it comes up, even though it's not supposed to.
Fair enough. But nonetheless, I mean, if his record appears as it should, this man just vanished for 16 years and then reappeared one day. It's like a storyline in Lost or something. And so now there's an executive session on Tuesday. I mean, I'm not going to speculate, so I won't on what that means. That does mean that there is some sort of movement, though, because that they wouldn't be taking that step. The manager wouldn't be going to the council to discuss this case unless something was happening. What that is, I don't know.
I don't mind wildly speculating. That's what I do on the This Week in Worcester show. While Tom maintains a sense of incredible journalistic integrity, I don't mind wildly speculating. So I'm assuming
just 1 second. The reason is, I just said I talked to the guy, and I don't want any of my speculation to be interpreted as something he tells. I don't want to go there.
So I don't talk to that. So anything I say is not anything. But I want to say this is, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but I would say that most of the time these kind of communications involve having to deal with significant issues for the city, right? So it's possible that there might have to be a recommendation made by the law department that maybe says, hey, we might have to pay something, or maybe there's something different. But we do have a changeover in the law department, right? So we have a new head city solicitor, and I'm going to say her name wrong, but I want to make sure I said her name right. Alexandra Kalkunis, right? And so maybe that's why we keep because I wildly speculate. But I mean, it is slightly informed speculation that there may be a different recommendation. I know that the one thing I do know fact wise is that at some point there was a strategy from the city that was to not communicate with Nat and his attorneys, and to refuse communication despite this ongoing situation, which I thought Nat, particularly in some of his public appearances and speaking that he did, one of which I was at, and you were there. I thought he did a great job in relaying both his frustration with the process, but also maintaining his calm while he was going through it. Because often in situations like that, what you would end up seeing is, he got mad. Look at that. We're not going to give him, some kind of excuse not to take care of this man. But 16 years is not like a blip, right? This man spent this, and it's not just 16 years. The 16 years he spent accused, and the 16 years in the prison system accused of those specific crimes. There's no doubt that this man went through it, and the city owes it to him to take care of it. And this excuse making process of, we didn't train them to do that. This is exactly what the Department of Justice report has pointed out, that in fact that there is a culture of these kind of things that happen in the Worcester Police Department for a couple decades now that lead to cases like this. Now, is every case like this, Tom? No, but there's enough of these cases to indicate that when things do go in this direction, there's a weird approach to things that involves, I don't know, not filing paperwork correctly, or maybe illegally writing police reports in a certain way, or maybe not interviewing witnesses, or maybe interviewing other witnesses in the wrong way, or blah, blah, blah. It's like a real common theme to those things. And so Nat and others like Nat, they deserve a fair shake. I will say this though. The report, this would be the third case since the report came out that has had some kind of response from the city. And I just want to remind you that all the leaders of the local public police union said that all of those cases were baseless, right? So even though there was multiple court judgments against just remember, folks, when you're dealing with the city administration and the folks that you're going to vote for, they are okay with local police officials saying that these things have no merit and then taking your tax dollars and handing it out in those cases that didn't have any merit. No merit, baseless reporting, right? Absolutely. But we're going to hand out 300,000, 400,000 checks. In this case, what you say the cap is? 750,000.
That's at the state level. That's what the state pays out. Not the city can. Cities aren't protected by that same limit.
I hope the city has to pay the $8 million, even though I know that affects our ability to operate the city. But the thing is that a judgment was awarded, and I think he deserves it. And I think the city, through a technical maneuver, did something that shouldn't have been allowed. And hopefully that there's some movement in his direction. So good for Nat, and good for him keeping up the fight.
Yeah, and just last year, a year and a half ago, in May of 2023, the city of Lowell settled with an exoneree who was incarcerated longer than that, but settled the case for $13 million out of court. There was no. I don't believe there was a trial in that case. It did go on for a few years between the time he filed and the settlement, but nonetheless, they settled with him. I'm missing how long he was incarcerated for. I'm looking at my own story and don't see it. So good, go me. But I mean, that's it seems as if that person didn't get Victor Rosario was his name. He was there it is, right at the top where it should be. So he was incarcerated for 32 years for allegedly burning a building that led to the death of people, and it was later determined that wasn't the case, and that the most likely scenario was, as he said at the time, that he was breaking. There was a fire in the building. He was breaking windows to try and help the people inside, and when he broke the windows, the added oxygen stimulated the fire and made it much worse. But they were able to come to an agreement with this individual, but not in Worcester. And so I just the total gross hypocrisy is that this happened in, well, I think that's first trial. Well, his criminal trial was 2002, I believe. We've known about this for now. It's been 2 years since the trial, right? Completed. So since the trial ended. So you have the whole lead up investigating to file the case, and then discovery, the case itself, right? This has gone on for a very long time. And I hope this is a sign we're getting to near a conclusion, because pay that man. But I'm also, while I'm optimistic for him, or while I'm hopeful for him, rather, I am certainly not optimistic, because what the city has done to this man is absolutely reprehensible. And that the city can argue out of one side of its hypocritical face that, oh, we're not responsible for what they did. What they did is so atrocious, we couldn't possibly be responsible for that. But yet, still employs one of them, and the other one was employed until they retired. Because we don't fire bad cops in Worcester. We baby them.
It blows my mind. You know, I mean, I know I've been going back and forth with several of the local police union leaders. The fact that they have never been disciplined for crimes that they admitted to on record, right? Changing and modifying police reports under cover of night and secret things and destruction of evidence, and they still are employed by the police department. And actually going back to certain cases, both City Manager Batista and City Manager Augustus, and even going back further back to City Manager O'Brien, regularly you'll see statements related to these officers be like, "Well, we don't want the officer to lose his job. We don't want the officer to lose his job. So we're going to have conversations, internal conversations with these officers, and discipline and training." Well, you hear that thrown around a lot, right? Training. We're going to retrain these officers. But the officers in question committed crimes deliberately and are still employed. That doesn't make any sense. And listen, and I am saying out loud that you should hold people to the same standard, right? So my own personal background, I was not a great dude growing up. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but I deserve to be fired from some of those situations because I did the wrong thing. And that's okay. It's okay to say, hey, you know what, you committed a crime, or even if you didn't commit a crime, but you put us in such a bad position that we're going to walk away from you. And then it is not a union bargaining position that is normal to say, well, the union needs to protect its officers that commit crimes. That doesn't make any sense. Now, I'm not saying not to have due process for the officers in question, but in the case of the two recent cases that were paid out, right, between the end of December and early this year, involved the police officers in both cases writing false police reports and the city admitting to such by paying out to the people in question. And the officers have not been disciplined and are still employed. That doesn't make any sense to me. How can we trust the entire police department if we know at least two police officers that we know of are writing false police reports? How does a judge, if I'm a judge, Tom, and a Worcester-based police report comes to me, a defense attorney should be able to attack that police report's credibility, right? Because we know that we have documentation now that those officers are lying in their own admitted, their own things. And so it just blows my mind that that's an approach that the police department takes, and that the city is okay with, and then that there's people out there defending it, right? Like, people get mad at me all the time. I get actual death threats when I say these things, which is just stupid because no, you're not going to kill me, right? You're just going to send me a stupid text message. But how is that normal? How, as a police officer, can you believe in your heart of hearts, any of you, that kind of behavior represents the badge as they call it, right? Tommy, they're on the job, right? How does that make any sense? It doesn't. And we know that, and it's illogical and it's foolish, but instead they lean into this like culture of brotherhood and opportunity and organization and all this other stuff, and it's okay in their minds that some of their brothers are actual criminals, which doesn't make any sense. Again, and I'm not trying to broadly brush all the police officers, but I would say that there has to be some level of accountability for the officers who are okay being on the job with officers they know have lied on police reports at a minimum. Not to say, not even to get into officers who've committed assaults, officers who've committed robberies, officers who may or may not have been involved with even more significant crimes, are still working on the Worcester Police Department and police departments around the country and the world. I just believe that we should hold them to a higher standard. That's all I'm saying. And I think that makes me pro-police, actually, not anti-police, right? I would like there to be a department of heroes, Tom, that actually we can rely on, but that is not currently the case. And I don't know how else to express it. How else do you express it? It doesn't make any sense.
And I don't really see anything different about the approach now from City Council and the administration as we've seen in the past, which is nothing. Which is do nothing.
No, I mean, No, so I'll be now. Last week I had said I've been a little rough on Bill Shaner from Worcester Sucks on his statement on Jenny Paseo. Let me go in the opposite direction. He made a great point in his article this week about an article from 2015 where Mayor Petty and Councilor Bergman refused, or they voted against the the city citizen review board, and said that the HRC was doing that job. And in 2015, Mayor Petty said, we're headed in the right direction. So I wonder if anybody has thought to ask Mayor Petty directly, and maybe I'll get a chance, maybe Manny, maybe you'll get a chance. In the 10 years since then, has the police department's reputation / behavior gotten better? Are we headed? Are we still headed in the right direction, or not? Because this current city manager just suggested a civilian review board is necessary. So, and then I would ask Councilor Bergman, does he still support the unions that have since done multiple crimes that have led to city payouts and city lawsuits that are not, and by the way, those lawsuits are not easy. Councilor Bergman made a statement in December about how easy it is to sue a police officer. Show me that. Show me those numbers, Mo, because I don't know that that's the case at all. I think that's nonsense. The conviction rate, by the way, for state prosecutors for people charged of crimes is still like 92, 93%. That's the conviction rate in Massachusetts. But the lawsuits against municipalities actually being settled and paid out or resulting in a municipal loss, that rate is much, 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 much lower. It's like 17, 18%. So the numbers just don't add up.
It's funny. The year before that, in 2014, this is
back, Tom.
You can go out. Well, no, I mean you raise a good point. In 2014, on the heels of the death of Mike Brown in outside St. Louis, Missouri, right. There was protests across the country, including here in Worcester. It was actually kind of a remarkable day. Protesters coordinated closely with the police department. The police department, in turn, appeared to let some things happen that it probably wouldn't have happened under other circumstances. They realized there was a moment here that was happening, right? There was a thing that was happening. There was a moment in time that was important. And so, but the two sides worked together. And there was actually a lot of seemingly goodwill earned that day, across both sides. It was kind of a moment where that could have been seized to, be a catalyst for other things about relationships between the police department and, and the people that live here, and especially people that are politically active, right? Which could have been a moment. And after those protests, it happened to be on a Tuesday that this occurred, and so many of the protesters went to City Hall, and gave their accounts or accounts of their loved ones or what they've heard or whatever, right? You know how that goes. Some people yelled and screamed. Some people made these broad political statements that were not really to do with the police department about the issue in a broad sense, in a national sense. But a lot of people weren't screaming, and they weren't not talking about Worcester. They were talking specifically about Worcester. And interestingly, the patrolman union president at the time, I can't remember his name, Dan Gilbert, I believe, also came to speak and talked about anti-police sentiment, of course, because that's their buzzword, and also screamed at the end of his testimony, or the end of his speaking time, about people chanting, the only good cop is a dead cop, or something like that, right? Of course, and instantly from the gallery, including people who had spoken very critically of the police department, instantly said, no, nobody said that, because nobody said that. There was a thing that was happening in New York and in other bigger cities. So, it's an interesting processing all of this other noise and then kind of blaming the people here for it. Typical. And then after all this testimony, all this discussion, the first thing City Manager Augusta said was, we talked about how he was at an award ceremony today for a police officer that saved someone's life in very difficult circumstances. We're not talking about him, stupid. And this is at the time the way they like to shift the conversation, right? Yeah, because this guy's great. That means they're all great, apparently. Although they'll give you 1,000 bad apples argument, but never want to find the apples. And then there was promises of all this stuff. We're going to do some community meetings and blah blah blah, a bunch of stuff that didn't happen. Never happened.
Right.
They never did it.
It never happened.
Where are we now? This council, what, a month ago, passed an item that said that they were going to have public meetings and discuss this, and no dates, no times, no discussion of it ever again. They're waiting for it to go away.
Yeah, the go-to move in this council, and I would say the majority, not every single council, but the go-to move in this council is to say, hey, we're going to do something, and then punt it to the future, hoping that everybody's going to stop being upset, right? That's the hope, right? That all these rallies and protests at the city council are going to end sometime soon, right? And because now we're in February, right? And city council election time is coming up, and people are announcing and pulling papers, and this is normally like a positive time, right, Tom? Right? This is the time when you get to announce, I'm going to run again, and I'm going to win again, and so we don't want this negativity. So we say things like, hey, we'll do this public hearing and that public hearing, and we'll do all this other stuff. And in the past, and this is a criticism of the Worcester electorate, voters here in the city of Worcester have been okay with that. They've been like, yeah, that's fine. They're going to do meetings like in a couple months, and everything's going to be okay. But now we have, at least in just the conversation you and I have just had, from 2014 on, an 11-year track record of multiple sitting city councilors who have just pushed off repeatedly, cycle after cycle, and still get voted through by their base these very pressing and important community issues. And that's really the nature of Worcester politics. They just think that in the end they're going to get voted in, and there will be no political consequence. And as you've I mean, we could talk about this in a broader sense, but as you see the people that are announcing for elections, there is a real sense that the Chamber of Commerce, that Tim Murray and some of the guys that he's been running with for a long time, have taken the position, because of maybe national politics, that it doesn't matter anyways. And so they're just gonna announce run, and so they're gonna try to get as many people on the council that are okay with the same old, which is developers, big time companies doing it that way, secret information, brutal, almost outright animal behavior by our local supposed heroes, doing crazy things in the cover of the night, gang-like, mob-like, gangster-like behavior from our city is going to be reasserted under the cover of, we're for first responders, and we're for white collar and blue collar workers, and it's the same old. And realistically, the people that watch our show and the people that watch the other local, smaller, independent media and read and all that, it's up to you to vote that stuff out. And my question, Tom, is I don't know if they'll do it. I really don't. We might get the same old again in November. And so as much as it doesn't, it's almost like evidence doesn't matter. Like we could just put hundreds of people that have been brutally assaulted, whether economically or even physically, by the city over the past 20 years, and it seems like people are okay with it. And the politicians know that they're okay with it, because their base will just vote them in.
I don't know. It's hard to. It's hard to avoid. Okay, to continue to avoid the obvious political implications of what it means when the police department turns on you.
Sure.
And
we saw that.
It's hard. It is hard to see, faced with so much evidence that there's, for 10, 20 years, that there is a problem here.
Yes.
And the unwillingness to do absolutely anything about it. It's hard not to begin to look at ask questions about if this is at all a political calculation. Listen, if the people that you're supposed to serve dealing with the stuff that we have heard and understand they have dealt with by some police officers isn't more important than to you than getting reelected, I think you're in the wrong business.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. Tom, there's this it's been for a long time this kind of dual approach to how we run the country, that it's almost like, hey, in the interest of progress, and by progress they mean building shiny buildings and selling more cogs, wares, whatever, right? Make sure you get your new style every three months, and make sure you get the new iPhone when it comes out, and everything's happy, and the new song, and like that. That's progress. In the pursuit of that, at all costs, there has been a political position taken by both Republicans and Democrats. So I'm not sparing any party here, that says it's okay that we kill an innocent person on death row, a few times a year, in the interest of this thing called the greater good, right? So the greater good says it's better to have more teenagers with iPhones than it is to have not a single innocent person die. So that is one political calculus that has been taken probably about 120 years now, real hold of the centrist policies of the United States' political class, right? But then there's this other group, and that group is often branded as like radicals and this and that and the other thing. When we say not one person should die. Not one person should die. If you die, you should die at home in your bed, comfortable with your loved ones surrounding you. That's a belief that I have, and that makes me a radical, Tom. And I don't want. I would rather have a guilty man go free than have an innocent person killed. If that makes sense, and I would prefer that kind of mercy versus the other thing. And I'm okay with my not having an iPhone. In fact, I have a Samsung Galaxy, right? So like, I'm okay with progress being limited a little bit and not having the shiniest, nicest stuff, because I'm okay if someone else has something that's close to what I have. I don't have to have more. And that makes me a radical. The pursuit of goods and services and money and compiling assets at all costs, somehow that's a good thing. And that doesn't really make sense to me. And it blows my mind. It blows my mind that that's how people think. And also, you can't cross think at all. So like, I happen to be a man of faith that believes in Jesus, and at the same time believe that I should treat people with mercy, and not the version that you see on TV, which is like, hey, we got to throw as many people out as possible to get the best version of life for us only, right? Other us. And we're just seeing that boiled down at the Worcester level. And that's it's really unfortunate for us. And yet I still love the city, Tom. I don't understand myself. I still love Worcester.
It's just it's almost like, still, as much time as I spend on issues in the city, reporting, whatever, uh, it's still kind of shocking to me. Like, we've all known, they all know the things that have been said over many, many, many years, the things that people say that have happened to them, that they've experienced, with the police, with some folks in the police department. They know. It's just hard, and they don't want
it. It is hard, and so it makes you wonder, like, what can I do? Amanda asked a good question in the chat there, like, how do we ensure that ethical leadership becomes a priority in Worcester? How do we make that a priority? The only thing I can answer, Amanda, is that we have to be ethical and moral as best we can. It doesn't mean taking a moral stand that as if you try to present yourself as a saint, right? I think we've seen over the centuries of human behavior, whenever someone presents themselves as a saint, often you'll find out that that there's things behind the closed doors, right? And it's never good. So I'm a slightly public person in Worcester, and so I have to try to do my best to be moral and ethical in my approaches. Now, I'm not perfect, and sometimes I get mad. Sometimes I cuss people out. Sometimes I yell, and I've made tremendous amount of mistakes in my life. But I think that having made those mistakes makes me someone who can view another person's mistakes as potentially redeemable, right? And And the reason why I think that Tom and I, at least from the journalistic perspective, and Manny and Bill and the other independent media here in the city, what we're trying to do, I think, as a project, is hold people accountable to that. Just that. Not you don't you don't have to be married with 3 kids, the perfect nuclear family, and go to church every Sunday and dress with the suit and the tie and all that other stuff. You don't have to do that, but we would like you to not blatantly lie in our faces. Right? That's like, is that hard? I don't know, Tom. I'm not sure. I guess it really is. It's so difficult to do.
Nothing pisses me off more than being told I have lion eyes. Nothing. I remember. I very specifically remember after Eric Garner was killed, and there was in New York, and there was the police union official whose name I'm not going to remember because I don't, but he's one of the biggest a-holes of all time, and a wall of uniformed police standing on risers behind him, right? So it's like tiered, so it's like a wall of cops. And here, and the union official, the union president there, screaming, "It wasn't a choke."
Oh yeah,
Screaming.
you didn't. Hold on, Tom.
A politicized autopsy because it wasn't a choke. Those are words he said. Like, you see the man on the video slip his forearm under the chin
Oh man.
and squeeze. You can see his arm flex as he squeezes. What are you talking about? And
No,
so these people will lie right to your face. Right to your face.
yeah, I mean, in the case of the one of the settled cases, having an officer use a dog on the back of a young man who was not identified as a person of interest, was not wearing the same outfit as the person of interest, it was waved off by the chief of police at the time, Steve Saucier, saying, well, anybody could have made that mistake. Anybody could have set a dog on a person not having to do anything with the case that didn't match the description of the case. That's normal. That's a reasonable response. Or another response where an officer, it goes up to a man talking to another officer calmly and just openly assaults him. Just physically attacks a person having a conversation with another officer, clearly, distinctly on video, and the same response. Well, anything can happen in tense moments. In tense moments, Tom, I don't know about you, but do you ever go up to and just punch somebody randomly that's talking to another person, and because you were agitated by the situation? I don't know what would happen to you if you did so. Right? What would happen to you? You'd be arrested for that, right? Normally, in a normal situation.
That's only acceptable if the person is Richard Spencer or people like him.
And that's the case, and then continues to be employed despite that behavior.
Yeah. So I'm so naive. I really am, because I really thought that, like, once the Fed said it, there would be enough cover to actually do stuff, and I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And so I hope those that get to the debates that are held or whatever, some of the questions revolved on, give us a specific policy proposal that would fit in reform of the Worcester Police Department. A specific proposal. I propose 6, and I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Well, so that's the thing. I mean, so Amanda in her next post said that, like, policy doesn't matter when there's no one willing to implement the policy. Just like arresting an officer who did commit a crime, which, by the way, another thing, again, I get a lot of pushback and a lot of negative feedback. There are a ton of officers who have been all along the last year and a half texting Tom and I during the show, watching in the chat and saying, hey, I don't want to be associated with the officer who did this or the officer who did that. The problem is there's not enough willpower in the entirety of the leadership structure to actually not just implement something, but not wait to implement it. Because what we get is, we're working on it. Well, It's not enough to work on it. It has to be.
You've been working on it since 2014.
Yeah, exactly. And even before that, right? Cases that go back decades, officers who have been in the force for years and years and years. And again, it's not an anti-police position to say we want that thing on the side of your cars, protect and serve, to actually mean something to everyone, not just the greater good. Every single citizen and every single person, not just citizen, by the way, because that word's starting to annoy me. Every single person who exists in any capacity in the United States of America and beyond should be able to look to a person who puts on a badge of authority and look at them and say, I can trust them because they'll keep me safe. And that is not the case for every person. And if I was the chief of police, which I'm not, or if I was a leader in the police department, that would pierce my soul to know there was one person who was afraid. You see some of these videos on TikTok and Instagram of young men and women, black and brown, who are afraid of uniforms. They've done studies showing that a little baby, 1, 2, 3 years old, sees an officer in a badged uniform and reacts with fear. If you're an officer of the law and you know that study exists, that should hurt you enough to say, I'm going to be the difference maker that is going to change the perception, not complain about how you got the perception, right?
So this puts the burden on rank and file. The burden is on leadership. No, the burden they're hired to do a job. Burden is on leadership. Clean it up, but they don't have the political will to do so.
Yeah, so I'm tired of the I was just doing my job mentality. No, and any officer who swears an oath to the Constitution to uphold it, in my mind, they're beholden to trying to do the right thing all the time. And so if your supervisor or up is not doing the right thing, well, then you should start pushing back. And I don't care if you lose your job or if you get ostracized because of it. To me, Bill Gardner is a freaking hero. He's a hero because he actually resisted it a little bit, right? And he resisted it not even that much, Tom. He just said, hey, don't punch this kid on the ground. Or, hey, it's not okay for you to use the N-word when I'm going to the bathroom. And basic requirements, basic boundaries. And then he was ridden out of the city of Worcester and ridden out of the police department by the entirety of it. And the rank and file, the ones who say, oh, I'm doing my job, they let it happen. So it's on all of them. It's on every single one of them. I'm tired of that excuse-making concept. And it's the same thing that's applied to the national things. If the president of the United States tells you to arrest some child, and you know in your heart that that's wrong, and you do it, it's on you, dude. You can't blame that guy. It's on you. And don't say, oh, I was scared, or my family, or da-da-da-da-da-da. Now that you're an excuse maker. And that's how you get ethical accountability. Every single person, we should all be pulling in the same direction, regardless of our pedigree, our ethnicity, and our creedal background. We should all want the same thing, which is caring for other people, not just ourselves. So I don't care about the rank and file's complaints about the leadership should fix it. No, they should fix it too.
I don't know. I don't think they're not saying it. They're not saying that. And listen, it was very apparent what the at least the unions and those that supported them that night at City Hall want. Everything is exactly the same. Nothing to change. And it's on City Council and the leader that they appoint, the city manager, to clean it up. And I don't, a phone line is cool. A place to report things is cool. Not good enough at all.
But what it really truly takes, Tom, what it's truly going to take is when Tom Duffy has the 12 officers pull a young kid over and pull him out of his car and start beating him in the street, is one of those officers pulling their gun on Tom Duffy and arresting Tom Duffy. Because that's what is needed. That's what's needed. And of course, that's going to cause an international incident, right? Having an officer pull a gun on another officer. But that is what is necessary to fix it. You have to hold them literally at the point of the spear to the same level of accountability that they swore an oath to. And if you aren't willing to do that, then we're going to continue to have this thing go down. And by the way, from a journalistic standpoint, by the way, we're going into City Hall and we're asking these questions and we're demanding accountability. Demanding accountability, you have to press them to their faces because they will not. The behind the closed door. Mayor Petty said this to me 20 times in my life. Hey, you catch more flies with honey than but you know what, Joe? If you're watching, that's not true, because you know where flies generate? Around shit. And it is what it is. You have to throw it, you have to dig it, you have to punch, kick, scream until it. And I'm sorry, Tom, no change has ever happened without political violence of some kind. And I'm not advocating hurting people, but I am advocating pushing back hard, as hard as you can, until they change, because they're not listening. They all openly and obviously they don't care. They just don't care.
It's I mean, and again, it's I think it is a good thing to try to do, to not attribute to malice what could be such stupidity, but it's hard to see it as stupidity anymore. It seems like this is what they want is nothing to happen.
It's a program, Tom. It's an intentional and willful designed program of how to maintain and increase power within a certain concentrated group of people.
Yep. And appreciate the comments, Amanda. Both good comments. I would just say, there is no oversight. Excuse me. Just sneezed. There is no oversight. City council has no responsibility to actually oversee the departments for which its committees, have jurisdiction. They really don't have any responsibilities. They do what they're told, really, from the city manager. Their access to information is all governed by the city manager. And this is the system. It's not the city manager's fault. This is the system we have. It's the dumbest system possible, but it's the system we have. So, without making it incumbent upon, city councilors that their responsibility, the core piece of their position is oversight. Also, I agree, oversight can't fix everything for sure, but it can help discover the problems. And if the problems are discovered, then there comes a political process of pressure or whatever to get something done about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have a public safety committee that for 9 years has not taken up a single item related to discipline. Not one in 9 years. Not one. Every settlement they filed, none of the countless settlements, none of the countless scandals and incidents, none of it inspired the chairperson of that committee to take up any, not even to review the process or any of these processes, or maybe some process documents from the internal investigations unit, which has written reports that are absolutely comedy. They're so bad.
It's unbelievably bad. Yeah, and it's ridiculous.
I mean, one literally says we can't know. You're not supposed to have to be able to know. It's called a preponderance of evidence. And if somebody at the police department doesn't understand the differences in standards of evidence, they really shouldn't be there. But they do understand it. Don't make no mistake. They understand it.
And in that specific case, Tom, with the we don't know. If you look at the chain of incident, right? The same supervisor who wrote the conclusion of we don't know also refused to do additional interviews with actual potential witnesses, said that the resources were spread too thin. And so this goes to Amanda's point about pointing out specific people. And believe me, it's not been easy over the past couple months when I've been getting attacked, but dude, Thomas Duffy, leader of the Patrolmen's Union, Anthony Petrone, vice president of the of 504, a former chief sergeant, current chief Saucier, he's sitting in a position and saying that it was a normal investigative practice to have officers getting hand jobs over their crotch from women that they were seeking prosecution against for prostitution, that was a normal process. And he didn't know that was a bad thing because it was a regular process. When did that become a regular process? But I just really quickly, did you ever watch like police procedurals growing up, like NYPD Blue or Homicide, Life on the Street, or Law and Order? Do you ever remember a standard procedure being that? When did that become a standard procedure?
I don't know if we should judge, reality based on TV shows, but
no, but I'm just saying. I mean, if the TV shows are based on how police, stuff was going on, and Dick Wolf had 10 police officers sit in on all these shows all the time, when did that become normal? When did I? By the way, I've read a tremendous amount of like mystery novels over the years, like John Sanford, Michael Connolly, John Connolly, like those kind of books. Those books, I've never heard of stuff like that. Never in my life was that a normal thing to be done. And to hear the current chief, who by the way has done some good things, say that was a normal investigative practice. This is what I'm saying. You have to actually say, what the hell does that mean in normal investigative practice? But we stopped doing that in 2018. Okay, but which officers were doing that, and why do they still have jobs?
There was a deposition a few years ago where an officer that was being deposed in the case was asked a question about this practice, and they answered that they had never done it. And then they were asked if it was permissible, or if it happened, or if it was part of, I forget exactly how the question was that, but it was asked because does it happen? And the attorney stepped in and said, "Don't answer that," and they refused to answer it. And then the attorney that was conducting the deposition appealed to try and force the court to have the court rather force them into answering, and the court decided ruled that it was not germane to the case that they were being deposed in. So,
which of course, the judge is probably, and then I don't even want to know which judge it is, because then I'll find out that judge is related to, and it's just like the system is just so.
Well, I mean, and this was before, we knew of any DOJ investigation, so that lawyer knew.
Yeah,
DOJ seems to figure it out.
Oh yeah,
they're all lying.
Yeah, none of these things that we read in these reports were new. That's the thing that
exactly.
On this whole time, when Tom, if you go back and watch Tom and I, and then in various iterations of our careers, we've been talking about this for like 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and not just us, by the way. Let's talk about Pat Sargent, and let's talk about Bill when he was at the Telegram and Gazette, and just Brad Petroshan and all these reporters. This is something that has been in the air of the city of Worcester for decades, not just like this report. People like it. I find it funny. Some of my friends who read that report and are like, "This is shocking. I can't believe that that this is happening." Like, no, this has been happening. this has been happening, and you're just starting to see it. And by the way, the reason it's coming out is because it's so bad. Which again, Tom and I like. Here's the ethical thing, Amanda. There's some stuff we can't say because we don't have secondary confirmations, right? But there's stories that I've heard that are even worse than this. So the ones that have made it into the DOJ report are mild compared to what we've heard, right? And so some of those stories might be made up, maybe they're fake, right, Tom? But then what if one of them is real? What if one of those is it's worse than we could ever imagine? It's a case that becomes a movie. That becomes like a horror movie, right? Speaking of horror movies, I might know a little bit about that here and there.
Okay. So anyway, I just
in a class with me, by the way, real quick at Clark. We had this amazing class with Jackie Morrill, who is a professor of English at Clark University. Woman in Horror. Amanda and I took this class together, and it was a tremendous tour de force class. One of the best classes I ever had in my entire life on some of the things that led to. By the way, turns out officials were accusing women, on the outskirts of society of things going back into the 1600s, the same exact practices that we see today. The only difference was they had buckles on their hats versus little ball caps.
But that doesn't happen here. This is the only place in the world where men in position of power would never use that power against women in a much lesser position of power. They wouldn't know. It's preposterous, despite the evidence.
Hey, put that comment on the screen right there, Tommy. Put that up. We want that. That's what we want right there. That last one right there.
What?
The one Amanda did. Yeah, exactly. Jackie Morrill for president.
Professor Morrill, be precise, was a classmate of mine, and I love that girl to death.
She's great. By the way, if any of you watching right now at the Dead of Winter Horror Festival at Mechanics Hall, February 22nd and 23rd, Jackie Morrill will be actually appearing in a Women in Horror panel, and she's going to be one of the people interviewed. We were able to get her in, and I'm super excited about that. So make sure you get your tickets to the Dead of Winter Horror Festival coming up soon.
Well, that went off on a whole tangent. In summary, there is movement. There appears to be movement on the Natale Cosenza case. I hope that he is duly compensated for the horror, for the despicable, awful horror that this city's government has put him through over far too long.
For sure.
We're going to be much quicker with the rest of our agenda here than we were with that. You, Professor Moral for President, love it.
Hashtag Professor Moral for President. Yeah.
So, you want to discuss the sheriff
Yeah. So
and
there's an
immigration.
article in the TNG, two articles over a week. The first one, Sheriff Lou came out in position of a new bill that was presented by two Republican state senators, basically that says the state should cooperate with the removal of people from the streets that have ICE detainers, because sometimes immigration and custom enforcement folks that have a detainer are just like you and I, if we commit a crime, sometimes are given personal recognizance. So this is the same process that happens to regular folks is sometimes applied in immigration and custom enforcement cases. ICE doesn't always, by the way, prosecute people because they're criminals. Sometimes you get into an issue with ICE because your green card has lapsed, so the paperwork wasn't filed, or the person who's your caseworker didn't press send on the email that was going to extend your thing by X. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that happens. So Sheriff Lou has gone on a little public campaign in the last 2 weeks, probably emboldened by the national policies that we see being implemented, and it leads to more people in his prison. And this is a significant thing that I feel I have to call out Sheriff Lou about. Sheriff Lou has been on a public campaign for almost 12 years now, since he was elected sheriff, saying that the Worcester County Jail is one of the most dilapidated and poorly maintained buildings in Massachusetts as far as a holding facility for people awaiting trial and convicted of lower level offenses. He said that we don't have enough capacity, we're keeping too many people in there, but now he wants these folks to be detained at his facility. That is rank hypocrisy on the thing of Sheriff Lou, and I am his friend and I care about that man, and I will call him out to his face. You cannot advocate for less use of the building and more money from the state to build new buildings, and then when you get the opportunity to get vulnerable people who have not committed crimes necessarily, well, we'll get into that in a second, but they need to be brought into your facility. Bullshit. I call bullshit on that. And every time I see him in public going forward, I am going to call him out on that, because there's little machinations that he's going to run for governor. Well, if you run for governor, Sheriff, you're going to hear from me on a regular basis. In every single forum and platform that I can get on, I'm going to call you out for that. You've been doing it for 12 years. You can't all of a sudden pivot to say, we don't have enough space, we need a new building too. Let's fill that space that's broken down and dilapidated with folks that have the least resources. Rank hypocrisy. So the second thing is, I'm sorry, Tommy, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, good.
The second thing is, the second article had local advocate Mari Gonzalez, who, by the way, does a tremendous work with El Boone Samaritano. But she indicated that she also agrees with the sheriff's move, because we need the criminals that are undocumented off the streets. That was her statement in the Telegram and Gazette. You can go look it up yourself, but that's what she said. And my question to Mari is, how do you know they're criminals? In our country, Tom, we have the standard of accusation that is innocent until proven guilty. Too many times have people been convicted in the court of public opinion, which doesn't mean squat, as we've seen, because you continue to vote for leaders that are horrendous. So if you say that they're criminals, show me that they have been convicted of a crime. Just because the president says this crime, that crime, this crime has happened. And by the way, there have been some terrible incidents, but those terrible incidents is not every single undocumented person. That's not how you get to do it. Plus, in the case of the terrible incidents, if they are arrested, that doesn't mean they are guilty, right? If you are arrested, that doesn't mean you are guilty. It just means that you were arrested. We have seen, again, going back to this document about the police, that the police will write false police reports and accuse people who did not commit crimes and send people to jail. In the case of Mr. Cosenza, for 16 years, he sat in prison for a crime he did not commit. And now we're fighting over nickels to pay the guy back for the years we took away from him. We know that to be true, right? On one hand. Yet on the other hand, we're going to say anybody who's undocumented, who's accused of a crime, is automatically guilty. You watch in the chat, you send me your stupid text, and I'm telling you to your face, rank hypocrisy. You shouldn't be convicting people based on rumor and innuendo. And again, this is what leads to fear of people. I go to a church that is a Hispanic church that has folks, right, that came from the worst situations that any American can ever imagine. And you're going to now make them fear living in their own home, going to school, coming to church. They can't even go to church without fear because these things are up in the air. And then local leaders and Sheriff Lou and Mari Gonzalez are going to fan the flames of that fear. Rank and utter hypocrisy. And I will call it out to your face.
So a lot of these immigration zealots, when they call people criminals, they're actually calling them criminal for their immigration status, right? Yet for the last, I don't know, 10 plus years or so, it is estimated that more people become undocumented in the United States by entering legally and overstaying than cross the border, unlawfully enter. It doesn't become a felony unless you have been deported and re-enter. Then it's a felony. It is illegal to cross the border without documentation or without, properly, just sneaking over the border. However, for what is estimated to be the majority of the people over the last decade that have become undocumented, who, have a document, a visa or a green card or whatever that expires, or whatever it is, they overstayed their legal admittance. That's not even a misdemeanor. It's literally not a crime. It is an administrative violation. It is less than a speeding ticket. So these people who are calling these people outright criminals just for existing, if you have ever got a speeding ticket, you're a criminal, according to those people.
Yeah, absolutely. Jaywalker, you're a criminal.
Criminal.
Criminal. Every time you walk not in the line. Hey, by the way, every time you pull up to a stop sign and you drive into the crosswalk, crime. Right? Let's go, dude. If you want to, everybody's a criminal. Then we're all undocumented criminals, and arrest everybody. Just arrest the whole country, lock us all up, and start from scratch, because it's ridiculous, dude. They make crimes just to be able to accuse people of stuff, and so you're so right.
And while there have been cases of people being injured, hurt, killed, assaulted, sexually assaulted, whatever, and worse by undocumented people, we don't do policy based on anecdote. And while it is tragic for the families that this has happened to, for sure, the idea that we should do policy based on how horrible stories are, instead of not based on the fact that it is just study after study after study after study shows that people who are undocumented commit crimes at a rate far lower than citizens, because they have more to lose, right? So it's natural that they're trying to stay out of trouble. At least one part of the reasons, right? So while we should all feel for families that have lost loved ones, or whatever it may be, the tragedy that occurred as the result of somebody who's undocumented. We can't doing policy based on individual stories or a collection of individual stories, and not looking at the macro effect, which is it actually makes you less likely to be the victim of a crime, because these people, we do kind of try to math these things, not anecdote these things.
So, right, let's not anecdote these things, but if we're going to do that, let's make the policies equal across the board. So what we should do is we should suspect every slightly balding, a little bit overweight, 50-year-old white man who drives a panel van, because that is the makeup of almost every serial killer that an entire industry is arisen around, showing them murdering, raping, and killing women all across the country for decades, right? So every single guy that in the city of Worcester that has a receding hairline and drives a white panel van, we should just unilaterally just pick all those guys up and put them in facilities and make sure that they're not criminals, right? Just in case, Tom, because if we're going to do wide sweeps of people on one side, let's do wide sweeps of things on the other side, right? And there's a bunch of categories like that where you could just say, hey, there's a bunch of people that look like this, act like this, do like this. Man, this sounds a lot like profiling, Tom. It sounds a lot like, oh, we're making generalized categories and we're just going to collect people into a group. Man, I swear, has there been historical times when stuff like that has happened and it's led to epic tragedy? I don't know, right? Like, doesn't that sound the same to you as some other things in history? And no, I'm not going to compare people to old world leaders because that's a stupid trope that doesn't work. It's ineffective and it doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense is that you're arguing for a policy on one side, but you're not arguing for the same policy on the other side. And that means you, again, officials, rank hypocrites.
And just lastly on this, people that like to scream that I lost the thought. Oh, that folks that are undocumented or in the country illegally or whatever, however you want to phrase it, that they have no rights and certainly no constitutional rights is so just dead wrong. It defies description. The people who authored the Constitution chose their words deliberately. And so when they say the people, they're not talking about the citizens because that's not what they said.
Yeah, because at the time, contextually, the citizens would have meant a landowner only. But that's not what they did. Even though those men were questionable in their practices, they did at least write a document that was designed at the time to encapsulate the most amount of people that lived here, right? Now, of course, they did bad things like not count all the people as people. So we have to deal with that. Some of our great heroes of all time were absolute trash bags. So, but the fact is, at least there was some thought in of somewhere in the future that there would be some way to view the word people as meaning more than just English dudes from Britain who owned acres. All right. And so at least it was a thought, even though they definitely didn't apply it fairly. We absolutely know that. We know the history of the country. That's easy to say. But the whole point of what we've gone through in the past almost 250 years, right, is that we have had an approach to the way we interpret that document has been to include more and more people in the process, at least engaging them and viewing them as humans just like us. And in this case, what we're seeing is openly a backtracking on that idea, which that's the grand experiment of America. That's the experiment. The experiment is not to make, people descended from British royalty, be able to have the most money and, make the most thing and not just the king, right? That's not the experiment. The idea was to bring together a group of ideas that helped the most people because they came from a country contextually that only let a small elite group of people succeed. England, that's what England did, right? It was just this one little family that was in charge of everything. And so if you say you're a constitutionalist, that's the context of the Constitution. You sound stupid when you say it doesn't apply to this person. No, the word is people. Now I'm mad.
You talked yourself into it. Let's move on from the question. Yeah, agreed. I mean, agreed, Amanda. They call them criminals all the time, as you just mentioned above with the the press secretary yesterday, today, whenever it was. That's why they say it, criminals over and over again.
She's a winner, huh? She's a winner.
I don't. No, not going there.
Oh man, where do they get these people from?
you and I arrived at City Hall last Tuesday.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. We had a little.
configuration of the chamber.
Yeah. So okay. So let's talk about this backstory. So 2 weeks ago. All right. First of all, the whole backstory is this. For the last 2+ years, I have been advocating with personal honey conversations with Mayor Petty and his chief of staff, Manager Batista and his staff, and Clerk Vangelli and his staff for equal access for independent press at City Hall. If you've noticed, the only press agency that has been given access to the little table just beyond the rail in the middle of all the councilors has been the Telegram and Gazette. That has existed for about 8 years. Okay. If you go back 8 years, they used to sit in the corner back when there was more reporters covering City Hall. So in the past decade, we've had less and less and less reporters covering City Hall, and there was a shift of only one organization being allowed to do that. I have helped Manny build his company, Manny J Media LLC. My position is the executive producer. It's my job to book guests and to do things. I help with a lot of the business operations, and I've been advocating for Manny to be able to sit at that table and set up his camera at that table. Which, by the way, when NBC 10 and GBH come, they let them do that. They let these big traditional media organizations sit in the middle, and they consistently push back. And I don't want to just say Manny. When Tom wants to go there, if I wanted to go there, when Adam from Mass Live tries to go there, when Bill Shaner tries to go there, and then other independent people like David Webb, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget Suzanne, that bring their cameras and want to just put their cell phones in there. They have been resisted by the city, and over the past month, all of a sudden the police officers and Chief Saucy and I are going to have a conversation about this. Have been asking Manny for his credentials. So when that started happening, I went to Tom Matthews, who is the press person for City Manager Batista, and said, "Hey, what's the process for getting press passes? Because we've been asked for press passes." And he said, "There is no process. There is no process. There is no, and if you go on the city's website, there is no process in the city of Worcester, the second largest city in New England, for credentialing press to have access to City Hall, and it's never existed ever. It's never been a policy. There's no written form of it. There's never been an application. So Manny gets stuck at the little corner trying to cover public comment, and often he's in the way, and it makes it uncomfortable for him and for the people. But he is press and should have access. Not last Tuesday, the Tuesday before, Councilor Russell, out of nowhere, decided to start whining about Manny's camera position. Manny has been in that position over the past year more than 20 times. And Councilor Russell says, "I can't see the podium." Out of nowhere. And the reason I believe it is because it was retaliation, because Councilor Russell feels unfairly treated in the process in relation to the Gaza resolution and things that I've said, even though I never said anything publicly about Councilor Russell, but he thinks that I have affected his fundraising ability in District 3. That's his own words. So on camera, you can hear him making complaints. And then against the law, Chief of Staff of the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Eliana, came over and moved Manny. And when that happened, I filed a formal complaint. And when I filed the formal complaint, I filed it to the city clerk, who is supposedly the person who runs the meeting. I CC'd Eliana. I CC'd the city manager. I CC'd Tom Matthews. I CC'd a bunch of people. I just said, I put it out there. And their response was, and I also included in this case law, both at the Supreme Court level and the Massachusetts level, in relation to these exact cases being lost by cities in Massachusetts over the past 2 years. So their response was to create a new special media section. Yay, we win, right? It's a victory. Nope. They did it in where the public sits. They created an area and took seating away from folks who are handicapped to punish me, really, through Manny. The most ridiculous thing ever. And so I went and I made public comment on this, and specifically went after Clerk Vangelli lying to other people in the public who he sent emails to saying that we complained that the Telegram and Gazette shouldn't have that access. That's not what I said. I asked for Manny to have equal access. That's it. So they tried to, flip it on me, but I keep the receipts, baby. So I got all the emails, everything. We can go at it anytime you want. Councilor Russell, you want to have at it? Let's go. Like lawsuits, bring it. I'm down for all that. But in the corner of City Hall, in the Esther Howland room, there's literally a section where there's just a pile of empty chairs. And I asked for that to be the section, Tom, and they won't even do that because they are literally willing to do the worst possible response anytime they're held accountable. They get offended. They get upset. The chief of staff has been saying things about me all over the city, running her mouth, thinking that I don't hear about these things because she's upset with me because I've challenged her baby, the mayor, and I've challenged the city manager, and I have no problem putting my name on these words. This response is not only unconstitutional and illegal, and it will eventually shake itself out. I have no problem talking about things that I want to do, but it shows that we are so poorly managed as a city that they can't do a basic accommodation because John didn't say it nice enough to me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say it nice enough to you. I'm really sorry. Hold on. Let me pet you for a second. Just put him in the corner and let him have space. You guys should be covered because you do stuff like this. You should be kicked out. All of you should be voted out because you do stuff like this. This is ridiculous. It's juvenile at best, Tom. And it just shows that we are not even remotely close to the city manager and the mayor's goal of being the best managed city in America. And you can get whatever rankings you want from US News and World Report that Tim Murray pays for. It doesn't matter when we see the actual results played out. So that's the whole history and backstory of the press box.
I don't have a lot to say. Sometimes they do things that just make your head spin. Like, where is this city? Does this city exist on Earth with the rest of us? Like, are we living in the same reality as the rest of the planet? I'm not sure that we are some days.
It just boggles the mind, Tom, because it was an opportunity. By the way, I understand people are going to say that I'm biased in Manny's direction.
Of course you are.
Let me say something real quick. That dude just shows up, right? And he's been open about not being perfect, but that dude shows up for everything. And so all we're asking is for him to be able to be in a spot that allows him to do what he does, which is show up. He literally, his entire career, he just shows up, and he should be celebrated. That city, the dude they should put his face on the wall. He's a good dude who's just trying to show the community what's happening, because, by the way, nobody watches the city live stream. I know this for a fact, right? Because on Managing Media's version of it, we get 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 viewers. On the city stream, they get 73. Right? So if you think you want a better managed city, wouldn't you want more people involved, more people engaged? Well, that's what Manny's doing. So why wouldn't you want to support that? They don't, Tom, because they want a narrow view and they want a narrow approach, and they want the least amount of people to be engaged, and that allows them to keep control of what they consider to be power. But let me tell you, Worcester's a small pond. You're just a big giant. You're a big shark in a really small pond. If you went outside of Worcester for 15 seconds, you would not succeed at the level that you've been able to do. It's because, as Tom pointed out, the system is broken, and we have to overturn the system. Is the only way, really, truly, to have real, dynamic, forward-moving change that allows more people to be involved in the governance of the city of Worcester. Fiona says we like that Manny's version is unedited. Yeah, that's probably why people like raw and uncut emotion. They like that. They do, and they deserve to see what really actually is being said.
And lastly, just really quickly, I do have one other thing, but I say it for the end. But the requested report on interpretation rule 11 has been returned to the city council from the city solicitor. It just recaps the rule, but I found it interesting that it's only like a 3-page summary, 2-page summary from the solicitor. It basically determines that the council has broad authority to interpret its own rules, which is nothing new. But I did find it interesting. It didn't make any mention of precedent in equal treatment of people and whatnot. Totally avoids that entirely. So I don't know this. You know, I mean, maybe this wasn't the place for that. I don't know, but you know, I found that a little odd. It seemed, you know, it's largely the solicitor is I'm not sticking my nose too far into this because it's not my bag. Of course,
Yeah, no,
if we were
right.
a city that ran like a city should in America, the city solicitors would have nothing to say about city council because it is independent from the administration. The solicitor is an administration official. It is like the attorney general of the United States telling the U.S. Congress what it can and can't do. It's stupid. It defies all basic American civics. It's wrong. It's irresponsible, and it's childish.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It just, again, it goes back. It's running cover, by the way. Again, you know, I'm the new city solicitor. You know, God bless her. I hope she does a great job for the city. I really do. I want her to succeed. I want everybody to succeed. But it looks like, right, starting off right off the bat, we have opinions being issued by the city solicitor's department that are running cover for the ability for the mayor and the city councilors to suppress speech, because this rule 11 means that, you know, if someone submits a thing asking a question about a particular individual on the council, it can't be heard. Again, I believe that these rules are unconstitutional. I think that the interpretation that the city solicitor has taken is consistent with the last 30 years of interpreting the charter. So that is what they're doing. They're just doing the same thing that has been done. And of course, you know, Mike Trainer has been in the city solicitor's department for, you know, 3 decades. It's not all his fault because he's just interpreting what his bosses want him to interpret. But again, it kind of indicates that we're going to have the same old from the city solicitor, and it doesn't reflect national law or even state level law. It just reflects common practice in the city of Worcester over the past 3 decades. And it again, mismanagement, and you know, it's too bad that we can't have a broader allowance of people to enter in. And how does it hurt, Tom, to have a petition on the agenda where I say I would like the city council to investigate Tom Marino because I hate him, right? And so, you know what? If I put in a petition like that, let it on there. Let me get up and make a fool of myself at the mic, and then have every city councilor go, Tom Marino's the best, and vote me in and vote it down. Like what? Like, it's the opportunity to engage with somebody that might say something stupid, but also what happens if you have a young kid who's just getting involved with civics and wants to get involved in city government, and they put in a petition that's not exactly worded right based on the interpretation of the current city solicitor? Are you going to just deny it? Like, we're just going to not let it be on the agenda because they're 16 and they didn't write it right? Is that what they're saying? Or what happens if someone has a language barrier? They didn't write it right, but give them a chance to make the petition. It just shows the just nonsense thinking process over there. And I don't know, maybe more and more I'm leaning towards maybe I need to go change it. I don't know how it's going to work, Tom, but something's got to change.
So I didn't. Not that there weren't a bunch of valid points in there, but that's not how I interpreted this document. I see this as a punt. You know, this is not my job to interpret your rules. Is basically how I interpret this. It's very, you know, it's cited very directly. It's very short. You know, there's not really any commentary here. It's pretty straightforward. This is your problem, not mine. Is how I interpret it.
Yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned the city charter, because last thing real quick. As anybody who's listened to this before probably knows, this is my thing. The city charter, the city of Worcester is probably, you know, in the bottom 10% or in the top 10%, however you want to phrase it, of the worst documents ever written. It's really a piece of garbage. It is not a government that's suitable for a city. It pretty much appoints, has the city council appoint a supreme leader and then defer to the supreme leader on just about everything. It's really a piece of garbage, and it's not government. It's more like a corporate structure. You know, you have a board, and then you have the guy who runs the show, and then, you know, the board will check up sometimes.
Put that comment on while you finish.
I just screwed up the whole screen. Johnny, we're like 90 minutes in, brother. I don't think I'm going to cover the whole thing for you.
Hey, everybody in the chat, go right after Sean.
So city charter is bad. So as anybody who's listened to this at any time before, probably have heard. It's kind of my thing. I co-founded an organization that's seeking to is pursuing charter review in an effort to get the change.
What's the name of that organization, Tom?
The name of that organization is called Mass Spring. So I forget exactly when, late last year sometime, the mayor took to the floor of city council in response to an item about charter and declared that he believed that it was time to do a charter commission. If you weren't aware, the charter is the kind of the foundation, the constitution of the city, if you will. It's the foundational document of government. It says, we have a city manager, we have an administration led by a city manager, we have a city council, it's a legislature, blah, 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 right? And so the mayor said that, so, I had an opportunity to meet with the mayor, great meeting, and he seemed to believe what he said, and I don't doubt that he does. However, city council process is to send those items that he requested when they came back. They sent them to the Committee on Municipal Operations, which took up those items before the meeting last Tuesday. Their meeting was at 5. City council meets at 6:30. And while they held the items, waiting for a report from the solicitor, because why wouldn't you get your legal advice from somebody who doesn't represent you? It seemed pretty clear to me that the chairperson and the member of the council, of the committee, Councilor Bergman, Councilor Florio, were not impressed. And they both basically had the same comments, to paraphrase, that they're not hearing a lot of concern about this in the city, and that basically go get your signatures. This is going to die here. It was the way I interpreted it. They were very nice. I was called back to the podium a couple times to clarify something or have some conversation. So I appreciated how the meeting was run. I didn't, obviously didn't agree with the comments. So it would appear that, at least now, with this item, these items are probably not going to make their way back to the full council, which means city council has declared that they're kind of, not as a whole, but procedurally has declared that it seems that they're out on charter. And let me tell you, that was a mistake on their part. I've went and tried to include them in this process, right? And was certainly willing to make, not that this is a negotiation between me and them by any means, but in the process of trying to figure out how to get this done, right? Because the kind of formal process is that there's an election for a charter commission, which then does the review and produces either changes or a new charter, and then that has to go to the voters in the next municipal election. So it's like a 2-cycle process. But council actually cannot put that election on the ballot. That can only be a state law, come from the collection of 15% of registered voters, which would be about 20,000 signatures, which is a lot. Especially when you're talking about, I forget I don't remember what the number was now, registered voters, but 15% is about 16,000. We said 20,000. So you have some that won't be certified because the address is wrong, whatever it might be. So you always have to get more. But I think so obviously that's not ideal. We have done some of that, but 20,000 is a big number.
Yeah.
And so when the mayor said what he said on the floor, cool, maybe we can do this together, right? Because council can, approve and put on the ballot a new charter, and it can design that however it likes, right? There's not really a formal process here. There is a formal process through the election, the 20,000 signatures, right? But council can do a lot with this. For example, in the 90s, it formed its own committee that produced a charter that went to the ballot. Voters rejected it, but that was their process. The city council wrote it. Right. As you can imagine, it was heavy on city council power, and that was not what was billed to the public. So when it went before them, it was rejected.
Roundly rejected too, if I recall correctly.
If I remember, yeah. Well, so there's a story there, but that's not let's not tangent.
Okay.
So we're assessing where we're at. This is certainly, absolutely, 100% not the end of the subject. I promise you. This is going to get done. The question is how. And so we're evaluating our options. I don't want to say too much now because there may be some surprises coming, but we are evaluating our options, and there are options available to us. We just want to make sure we make the right choices. But it's myself and the folks that started in last spring. We're having conversations about how we move forward now, understanding that it would appear that council is out on the process, and all I'll say about that currently is that's a big mistake on their part. And Shawnee, you're right on the right track, brother.
Sean,
you don't have the whole story there, but you got a piece of it, and they're gonna. It was. I wish they had participated, but they've chosen not to. So we'll chart a new path here soon.
Yeah. So although I've seen some of the stuff that you propose, and I think that there's like nuance and differences and things. I support charter review opening up, and if it becomes a signature based thing, Tom, I can tell you this: I'll pledge you my signature right now and my support publicly for it. Whatever I can do to help move it along, because I do believe that again, blowing up the system, changing it radically is really the only way to get it done. Yeah.
Hilarious. I am not putting that on the screen, but it's hysterical.
Throwing those up on the door there. So I'm down, and I'll help collect signatures too. I have no problem doing that. I'll walk around with notepads and let's get it done. I think that it's the right thing to do, and I think that we see that in the frustration of the conversation, right?
Yeah,
but
that is this is I get worked up about how bad the charter is, but listen, this is just doing business, and that is their right to kill those items in committee. They're elected. They have options available to them, and no hard feelings about it. I don't like it, but no hard feelings to the people involved. But that's not going to be the end of the story. I can promise you that.
So you know what time it is, Tom?
It is your favorite part of the show.
No, not just my favorite part of the show. So don't try to look at that. That was a little, prevarication there by Tom Marino. This is the people's vote have voted and spoken loud and clear that the favorite part of the show is when I asked Tom about his favorite things. Eventually, this will be a sponsored segment brought to you by some local business who will talk about, and it'll have like a version of my favorite things from The Sound of Music, but it'll be in Tom's voice. Right, dun, 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 when we asked Tom about his favorite things. If you can tell, I like The Sound of Music, and we could talk about that at any time. So
catch John's independent podcast called Analysis of the Sound of Music, not to be heard on This Week in Worcester.
Yes, absolutely. I will do a Sound of Music podcast. I'm going to do that now. And Leanne's probably over there thinking she loves the movie stuff, right? So we're going to have to get that going up on Hollywood. We'll get all that stuff. All right. So last week we talked about favorite pizza, like kind of pizza, and Tom, talked about that. That's obviously on my heart because I'm a pizza guy. I'm pro pizza. And so this week I wanted to go away from food. We've done a lot of food. We've done ice cream and
Thank
candy.
God.
Huh?
Good. Away from food, enough food.
So you know what, Tom? I thought I would kind of lean in a different direction because our audience is expanding. We happen to have a lot of officers and a lot of kind of like dudes watching the channel late today. And so you know what, Tom? I don't know this about you, whether or not this is true or not, but Tom Marino, are you at all a car guy? And if so, Tom, what's your favorite car of all time?
The one that gets me to where I'm going.
Tom answers with the "I'm not a car guy."
Yeah, no, I could not be less of a car guy. I don't even get it. Like,
Uh,
brum brum. Who cares?
no,
I, I mean, I like gadgets more than brum brum. You know what I mean? Like, I want like climate control and whatever, and like a cool, like the new cars today. They have newer cars today. They have the whole display, and like I love all that crap.
yeah. A minivan. You want a minivan? I get it. I understand what you're saying.
I mean, I'm talking about like the dash component. I don't need a minivan. But like in like the everything's push button on the screen, and like that's cool. But like, do I need to drive whatever a Corvette or a Mustang or a BM or whatever it might be? No, I don't care. I don't care
Okay.
even a little.
All right. So if I ever become independently wealthy, the car that I would want is a 1973 Cadillac Eldorado. And I would like to rebuild it by hand from scratch. That and for anybody in the chat who knows cars, the 1973 was the last year that they had the square headlights, and it is the epitome of an old school gangster, big square giant boat of a car. If you go check out the old Cadillac Eldorado, it is phenomenal. I love that car, and so that's my favorite car. Sometimes I ask these questions with the opportunity to just show all the folks that watch our show how ridiculous I really am deep down inside. So
I
73 Cadillac Eldorado. Go do a Google search and you'll check it out. Look for one in like slate gray or I forget what the name of the black was that the cat because back in the day the car companies used to name the colors like a specific color and then sue each other over the colors. So it's like something something black or whatever blue blah 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 blah. And so but the dark ones were just amazing cars. Also, if you got into a car accident today versus a 1973 Cadillac Eldorado, you would die instantaneously because they were made out of steel and would run right through like a modern any modern pickup truck would get immediately destroyed by one of those cars because they weighed like 2 tons. They were giant boats and took up the entire road. And so they were gas guzzlers. I'm not pro gas guzzler, which is why I said I want to rebuild it because I really think I really like efficiency in motors, and I think it would be cool to have like a fuel efficient monster of a steel era Detroit area car. So
just the closest I can get is I found it interesting. Well, I don't know. It's got to be 10 years, if not more now, maybe 12 or 13 since Porsche put out the Panamera. I was like, they made a 4-door. I would never pay for it because they're insanely expensive. But I was like, neat, I guess. That's as about as excited as I get about car stuff.
Yes, Sean, it was in Malibu, and it was awesome. Sorry, there was questions in the chat. By the way, also, if we're gonna go movie car of all time, it's got to be the DeLorean, hands down. Hands down, it's the DeLorean, right? Because we can go back to the future, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, I'm sorry. Some of my answers are duds.
This is okay. This is fun. This is exactly what it is, and people can respond. By the way, anybody during the week go on This Week in Worcester and read Tom's articles. He writes a lot of different stuff about a lot of different stuff, not all politics. He talks about events in the city. Hollywood News is published under This Week in Worcester's banner. You can read all kinds of content. Go to thisweekinworcester.com. You can also follow This Week in Worcester on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, all the platforms. You can find Tom.
That one Facebook owns the Facebook's Twitter knockoff, whatever.
Yeah,
we're up there.
Once you follow that, remember, if you want more content from Tom and I, the way that you support us is click, and then eventually local businesses and people support and sponsor. Same thing with Manny J Media. Get out there and support us and click on all the websites, mannyjmedia.com, hollywoodfilmgroup.com, thisweekinworcester.com. We're working together towards a common goal of independent media in the city of Worcester. So if you support that goal, there's ways for you to support us. Go click on the websites and you can find out how today.
Just responding to Shawnee, he said, Porsche made a Cayenne, which is an SUV. Yeah, no, they did, facts. But this is it's called a Panamera, like a Pan, Pan America, minus the A. It's like a sort of, I mean, it's hard to call it a sedan because it's still a Porsche, but it is 4-door. They did well for a while. They could have stopped making them for all I know. But I was like, oh, they made a 4-door, neat.
You cannot put Sean's latest comment on the screen. Especially after I plugged all the companies.
So at 1 hour 44 minutes, I appreciate you all participating and watching. We do this every Sunday at 8:35 ish. We get started. We're not usually all that late, maybe a few minutes though. So until then, we will try and screw it up less next time. Have a great week. Try and weather our weird city.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.